So first of all, thank you for joining us on this webinar today as VolCorp introduces its new wholly owned CUSO Symphony. My name is Christina Adkison, and I'm the president and CEO of Symphony. I also serve as the Chief Experience Officer for VolCorp. Seated next to me is Jeff Dato. He is the Executive Vice President and the Chief Operating Officer of VolCorp. He also serves as a consultant in the risk advisory services within Symphony. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Christina.
Before we begin, I'd like to start out with going over the agenda. We're going to basically, each person is going to introduce themselves prior to speaking, and then we're going to talk about the purpose of the of Symphony, and then we're going to go into the services of the supervisory committee audits, risk advisory, contract negotiations, and then we're going to wrap it up for the day. So let me give you a little bit of background about myself. I started at VolCorp in 2019. Prior to that, I worked in the credit union industry for over 20 years, starting out as the accounting specialist at a credit union and working my way up to the chief financial officer of a $400 million credit union. During that time, I had the privilege of working on several mergers and also had the privilege of working in several conversions and implementations. When I started at VolCorp in 2019, there was already discussion about starting a CUSO. So why a CUSO? Why did VolCorp need to move this way? Well, the purpose was simple. We needed to expand our products and services into areas that could help credit unions. So we began to speak with credit unions, asking what their pain points were. The pain points were similar to the things we've been hearing for years, and that was we need help with regulatory issues, compliance, and then add in information security, risk advisory services. So with all of that said, we decided, hey, this is something that we can help credit unions in. So that's why we started Symphony, to make sure that we understand and we never forget our mission. We developed this mission statement, which states, at Symphony, we navigate the hurdles of operating a credit union so you don't have to, transforming our organizations that inspire success. So everything that we do matches up to this statement. We want to make sure that we are offering credit unions the best products and services that can help you guys be successful. So to go on to our first service, we're going to talk about supervisory committee audits. So as you guys know, credit unions are required to have an annual audit. The type of audit is based upon a credit union's charter and asset size. On this next chart, which was pulled directly from the regulation, it states, based on the type of charter and the asset size, what is required from an audit standpoint. It is either a financial statement audit, which is an opinion audit performed by a CPA, or a supervisory committee audit. And I want to stop and say that just because you may fall within a certain range, it really depends on the complexity of your balance sheet and your overall risk profile that dictates what type of audit you need. But for those credit unions that can use the supervisory committee audit, Symphony can help. And so here's what we can do for you guys. Using NCUA's other supervisory committee audit minimum procedures guide, Symphony can assist with your annual audits. Basically, we would come in, talk with your supervisory committee or your management staff or your board of directors. We would go through these minimum procedures to ensure that they match your risk profile. We would develop an engagement letter and then be able to perform the audit. We can either do this on site or we can do it virtually. And actually, we just completed an audit virtually and it went fine. The credit union was in West Virginia, didn't have a problem at all, worked out great. At the end of the audit, we'll provide a report that will give you the details of our findings. We'll walk through this report with you and make sure that you understand what we performed and what was found. We also can do an interim audit. This interim audit is basically, think of it as a wellness checkup. It's a smaller scope audit that looks at items in particular that maybe your board or your supervisory committee would like for us to oversee. So that could be surprise cash counts, or it could be looking at certain reconciliations on a quarterly or maybe even a semi-annual basis. And basically, it just prepares you for the annual audit to make sure there's no surprises at that time. And then finally, member verification. So as we all know, NCUA requires member verification every 2 years. Symphony can help you with this, either inside the audit, or outside the scope of the audit. So why Symphony? Well, first of all, we're not a CPA firm, so we don't have the overhead cost of a CPA firm. We believe we could price these to be cost effective to credit unions, which is very important in today's environment, and also real credit union experience. The people that are working on these audits have worked in credit unions. We understand the credit union accounting. We understand credit union operations. We also want you guys to be able to use this report for more than just answering a regulatory requirement. We want to make sure that we can provide best practices to you to strengthen your overall internal control in your financial reporting. And then finally, passion. As everyone knows, VolCorp will be celebrating their 40th year in business in April. Businesses don't stay around for 40 years unless they are passionate and they believe in what they do. And that is why VolCorp has been around. I want to assure you that the same great service that you have experienced with VolCorp, you will experience with Symphony as well. So thank you very much. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to talk about risk advisory services.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. How are you? Just a little bit about myself, just so you kind of get to know me. I joined VolCorp back in 2018, and I have 33 years in business, 32 years in risk, 20 of those years in industry, financial services, hospitality, aviation, manufacturing, et cetera, and then another 12 in the consulting space. Part of that time working for, at the time, it was the world's largest hot site vendor for IT, for those that may remember data center backups. And the rest of that time, about 9.5, almost 10 years, working in the Big Four space, leading global risk advisory service practices, specifically around business continuity and ERM. I also have a board background, spent 9 years plus on a board of directors, specifically recruited for my risk background to lead a risk committee for them in the healthcare space. So I've been able to practice it as an individual within the industry. I've been able to lead consulting advisory engagements. So I'm used to dealing with the board, I'm used to dealing with management, used to dealing with all levels of the organization, but also being able to look at it at risk from a strategic level as a board member and as a member of C-suite, and of which I've been 15 years in C-suite across a lot of these industries. So that's enough about me. I'm just going to kind of jump in now into risk advisory services so you kind of sort of understand what we're talking about with that. So what are they? I guess if you go back to the Uniform Commercial Code and you think about that's general business, common business practice, and you think about the prudent man concept for those that may have learned that, it really talks about, when there are, as a business operates, when you go to a court of law, there's usually a question that talks about, what would a prudent person have done, right? So if you do business in California, you can probably expect that earthquakes are probably going to be part of life. If you live on the coast of Florida, or you do business on the coast of Florida, you can expect that hurricanes may be part of things that are just become part of business. So, think about it, doing the right thing, that sort of concept. These are non-traditional service offerings that are outside a corporate's typical charter. They really focus tremendous amount on, not only managing or identifying downside risk, but also opportunity risk. So, if we want to move into a new marketplace or offer new products and services, what are the opportunities here, and what are the pros and cons of doing those sorts of things? The other thing it really does is that it gets into the concept of operational resiliency. And for those that listened or heard my presentation back at the forum back in August, I talked a lot about operational resiliency and the concept thereof, to where your organization is prepared no matter what, should there be some sort of an unplanned incident which causes your business to have a hiccup or a long-term failure. It also happens to be, risk happens to be a very hot topic right now, as you can imagine, and we'll talk a little bit more about that with the various services. So who or what benefits from risk advisory services? While all organizations benefit, I like to kind of point to all key stakeholders. And this really truly runs from internal to external, it runs across the gamut. But what it does is that by knowing and following that prudent man concept, your organization and your stakeholders can have a peace of mind that, hey, you know what? While things, while optimistically we want everything to work perfectly, things sometimes don't. And so this gives everybody a peace of mind that, hey, you know what, we have plans, we've rehearsed them, and we're ready to continue to offer excellent service no matter what. But bottom line is, it's an uncomfortable thing to say sometimes, but I think we all recognize the fact that the credit union movement, as well as all services industries, is kind of a commoditized sort of product and service out there, right? We have credit unions competing with credit unions and banks and fintechs and other organizations. And really, at the end of the day, if you manage risk effectively, it helps with your brand, it helps with your reputation, it helps ensure that you can support the mission. So I'm going to talk very specifically here about two different types of services. I'm going to highlight two of them. One of them is business continuity management, the other is enterprise risk management. So what is business continuity management? It really is the preparation an organization, the sort of preparations they make to help with responding to or dealing with an unplanned business interruption. It could be a lot of different things. I know that nobody on this webinar has had any sort of interruption or disruption in business. Think of things like pandemics. Think of things like hurricanes, flooding. There are a lot of different things that happen out there. There could be social media posts, right, that are very negative. So any one of those things are sort of these unplanned interruption of operation or disruption. And it's more than just insurance. I guess that's the big thing. A lot of organizations say, well, I have insurance. Well, it's great. Insurance will allow you to recover and recoup money, but it doesn't allow you to recoup your brand or your reputation or your business. So keep that in the back of your mind as well. We talked a lot about operational resilience here. Again, this is that whole concept of no matter what happens within your organization, no matter how critical, no matter how big and complex it gets, you have the comfort, as do your stakeholders, that you will be able to continue to provide those services as contracted, no matter what. There are four components to business continuity management. There's incident response or emergency response, and that's literally putting out the fire. And so what do you do as soon as something happens? There's crisis management. Crisis management is where you are literally managing the crisis, as the name implies. It's all the logistics. It's the key decision making. When do we declare? Do we go to a backup site? How do we handle our phones? There's the IT component of it, of disaster recovery. So how do we recover? When do we recover? Do we do real time? Is it tape backup? What is it? And then there's actually bringing back the business. So the business resumption is the other component. The services that, at least to start off in a crawl, walk, run mindset that we're going to be offering for BCM is things such as like training and awareness. We can come into both your organization as well as the board and provide some basic commentary and training and awareness around what business continuity is, the importance of it, and things we should be focused upon. Another service we can provide is coming in and doing an assessment of your program, whether you have it or not, and be able to help you identify, okay, according to best practice, according to the federal guidelines, what are the things you should have within your program? And then also provide a gap analysis between the regulation or the leading practice and where you are, and then develop a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year roadmap to help you get to where you need to be. One, it really helps you with your budgeting, really helps you as an organization understand where you are and where you need to go. But two, it's a really good tool for the regulators. When they come around and they're asking questions, hey, how's your business continuity program? You can point to a roadmap and say, hey, look, here's where we are today. We know we're only at this point, but here's how we're going to get there and when. Finally, exercise facilitation, and exercise is also another word, kind of fancy word for test. And a lot of people talk about testing, but tabletop, many of you are probably familiar with that. Sometimes the TDFI will notify you and say, hey, okay, there's been a bomb in your area, go and do a tabletop and come back. This is something that Symphony, because of the resources that we have, who are trained in business continuity and within the credit union space can at least help with the facilitation of such tabletops. So that's business continuity kind of in a nutshell. I'm going to move on now to enterprise risk management. And really what is ERM? It's kind of a fancy term developed 20 some years ago. But if you think about it, I always think about it as kind of the big picture of risk. It is also, when you go across an organization and you think of the different types of risk, upside and down, we have to manage. It's everything from managing an interruption, business continuity, cybersecurity, vendor management, compliance, legal. And so it's all those different things kind of wrapped up into one. Really, what it allows you to do is not only make sure that you have a program or a process to manage all of those, but really it gives you a formal reporting and governance structure for managing your risk across the organization. Types of risks that usually fall up underneath ERM, and this is kind of building upon a bigger piece because we're going to talk about strategy here in just a quick second. But think about compliance risk. Where are we in from a compliance standpoint? Are we willing to go? Are we a black and white sort of organization? We're going to follow every rule, every letter to the rule. Are we willing to slide a little bit into the shades of gray, right, and take advantage of that? What about ethics, contracts, any sort of legal side? And the financial part of managing risk, if you think of managing financial risk, you have things such as credit risk, liquidity, concentration risk. These are all things that the NCUA, TDFI are looking at, as well as your state organization, wherever you may be. Operational risk. This is not only interruption of business, but also transactional risk. Reputational. I've talked a little bit about your brand and reputation being everything. And so think about whenever you go into an action, what is it that's going to affect your positively or negatively your brand or reputation? And finally, strategic risk. These are the big picture, what's happening in the credit union movement. Are there mergers and acquisition happening? Are there government regulations coming down the pike? So all those things are part of ERM. It also provides guardrails for when you're building your strategy, right? You want to make sure that when you are building your corporate strategy, which is a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year strategy, you don't want to go into it blindly thinking that, okay, we're highly optimistic and all of our assumptions are going to come true. Well, that very rarely ever happens. So at least with ERM, you go into the strategy session and you think about, you challenge the assumptions that are being made and say, okay, well, what if this doesn't happen? And so what is the risk that is acceptable to our organization? You start establishing what's called risk appetite. So how much risk are we willing to take to achieve this strategic goal? And you can even go through the part where you put some guardrails and some bumpers out there to allow how much tolerance do I have, whether it's a financial ratio or whatever the case may be. It allows you to empower your employees. Imagine if your employees knew how much risk they were allowed to take, instead of every decision having to go back up to the C-suite, your employees knew every day, hey, you know what? We're allowed to do A, B, C, so long as our ratio doesn't get bumped here or there. And finally, it helps with your risk-based decisioning. You make smarter decisions, better decisions, and that's kind of where we're going with this. I've listed some of the services up here. Probably the one that I want to bring out the most here is the risk appetite facilitation with your board management. This is a service that we provide to where we can sit down with your board and your management separately or together and talk about how much risk are you willing to take as part within your strategy. It's very effective, something we do here at VolCorp. I think it's really helped with our strategic planning process. So some of the future service offerings within risk advisory, I've listed a handful here. Christina mentioned those a little bit a while ago. We've had a lot of our members that have come back to us to ask us for expertise that we already have within the corporate around compliance, information security. We're looking to potentially partner with some others around physical security as well as vendor management. Christina is actually going to be talking here a little bit about contract negotiation. And we talk a little bit about why Symphony. Christina actually did a great job in explaining a lot of those things. One thing I'll add here is the fact that when you bring the folks from Symphony in, you're bringing folks who are experienced in the credit union movement. We are experienced, trained, and certified within risk management. Every one of our professionals have certifications, and we have extensive experience within the space. So that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Christina and let her talk about contract negotiations. Thank you.
So contract negotiations. Back in January, I was contacted by SRM, Strategic Resource Management, and they stated, hey, I think I've got something that can help your credit unions. It's a huge benefit for them. And I'll be honest with you, at first I was like, I'm not really sure about this. But once I got into the due diligence and I got into talking with the references, I thought, wait a minute, this company does have a benefit for the credit unions, especially in today's environment. You know, when you look at your income statement, the loan demand is just not there, unfortunately. The yield on investments is not where you want it to be. So at that point, you really have to look at the other side of the income statement. You've got to look at your expenses. So behind your comp and benefits, your most expensive items are normally those core contracts or those debit card contracts, or even those credit card contracts. So at this point in this environment, we need to make sure that credit unions are paying a fair price and not overpaying to these vendors to provide the services that our members want. So at this point, I would like to introduce Dana Davis, Senior Vice President of SRM, so he can discuss the offerings within this company.
Well, thank you very much, Christina. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, excellent. So thank you very much, Christina and Jeff. Really appreciate it. As Christina said, my name is Dana Davis. I'm the SVP for SRM. I manage the Southeast, along with my colleague, Patty Webbles, who is also on the phone listening in as well. So really quickly, we're obviously delighted to partner with Symphony. Really looking forward to a fantastic working relationship and hopefully getting a chance to work with many of you on the phone here. So thank you very much. Taking a look at this first slide, really quickly, we've been around for a long time. So I've been in the business nearly 30 years. We are domiciled right in lovely Western Tennessee in Memphis. We also have an office as of a few years ago in the UK as well. But again, we've been doing this for nearly 30 years. We've worked with probably about 1,075 or so clients at this point nationwide. We've completed an upwards of 8,000 to 9,000 projects for those clients. The size of our clients can range anywhere between 25 million all the way up to, think about the largest credit union in the country. We've done work for them as well. I think they're around 130 billion. So we're really all over the board. Size does not necessarily matter in terms of some of the things that we do. Come one, come all. So really, there's a lot of things that we do, but what we're really known for in the industry and what Christina talked to you about is the contract negotiation piece. So our mission is really, really simple. And it's to make sure that you're getting the pricing that you deserve on your key payments and technology agreements for your size and scope. So she's already mentioned a couple of those areas. Think about your relationship with MasterCard or Visa, whether it's a direct relationship or a relationship that's sponsored in, those debit and credit card credit processing relationships, all of your PIN POS networks to make sure that you're fully optimized. That's very important. That core relationship, all of the attendant technologies that hang off that, thinking about online banking, mobile, those types of things. Those really are the contracts that you're spending the most money on. And it's very, very common for us to get into the nuts and bolts of these agreements and find, in many cases, 6, sometimes even 7-figure savings over the life of the contract. So, the reason that we often find so many savings is because, quite frankly, it's not really a level playing field. Typically, it's the vendors themselves that have the advantage when it comes to negotiations. And Christine, if you'll go to that next slide, please. This slide shows, some of the reasons why the scales are sometimes tipped in their favor. First of all, we all live in a very complex industry, right? Things are changing rapidly. You folks out there are probably negotiating your agreements every 3, 5, sometimes 7 or 10 years. So it's next to impossible to come to the table after that much time and know all the intricacies of the things that have changed and those types of things. It's also impossible to know the pricing, right? I mean, we work with lots of organizations that are very, very large, and they still use us because they don't know the pricing either. So they might think they're getting the best pricing, but oftentimes, again, when we get into the nuts and bolts, we find out that, they may be, 10, 15, 20% off where they really should be. So also the vendors know that it's very difficult for you to leave, right? So if you're going to change your core or your debit or credit processor, that's not always an easy scenario for you. I always kind of liken it to heart surgery, right? So we want to do all the things that we can on the front end with plenty of notice to put you in the absolute best position in terms of negotiating with these vendors. And again, we're doing this, virtually every single day. Next slide. So really, there's a couple of things that we bring to the table that are really the keys to our success in my mind. And there are a couple of things that, again, would be very difficult for you to have as a credit union. The first thing is that proprietary benchmarking data. Because we have over 1,000 clients, because we've done over 8,000 projects, we know exactly what your pricing should be for each of the vendors. So we've got the relationships with all the vendors. You think about everybody out there that you do business with: MasterCard, Visa, Fiserv, PSCU, Digital Insight, Harlan, Deluxe, right on down the line. We know them all well. They know us well. They know that we know the pricing, and we can cut to the chase relatively quickly. The other piece of that is our team of negotiators. So these guys come from the industry. We hire seasoned guys, not folks that are fresh out of college. And we just have a wide range of experience. And in many cases, our team come from the very vendors that we negotiate with. So you think about Fiserv, think about Visa, MasterCard. We've got guys on our team guys and gals on our team that came from those vendors. So what that translates into is an in-depth knowledge of the pricing terms and the tendencies of these vendors. On average, we save our clients roughly $80 million a year. So it's really important, right in Tennessee, just as a couple of examples: FedEx employees, Southern Security are a couple of clients of ours. South of you in Alabama, America's First in Alabama, Credit Union, Georgia United in Georgia, SECU and Truliant in North Carolina. So we work with lots of folks that, ultimately, if you wanted reference, we're happy to provide those. Next slide. Really just kind of reiterates what I just said. You'll recognize pretty much every logo on this page. These are some of the logos where our team of negotiators have come from. So again, the First Datas of the world, the Deluxes, the PSUs, Visa, right on down the line. Next slide, please, Christina. So kind of in a nutshell, different reasons why you might want to consider working with us. First of all, our typical model, and there's lots of different ways we can structure our fees, but typically there's really no risk on your part because we will only get paid if we perform. So our model is what we call a shared savings model. Typically, if we find savings that weren't there before, we would participate in a percentage of that for a limited time of your contract period. Our process is extremely non-disruptive. So this is one of the things I love the most. And this is coming from a guy that used to sell processing and how you had to schedule and budget for that. There's none of that with us. If we find an area or two that we can work on for you, all you really need to do is provide us with that data, i.e. agreements, a couple of months of invoices. We will take that entire project and manage it on your behalf, thereby freeing up your bandwidth. So it's really easy to work with us. We are completely independent. So if you hire us to work for you, we are advocating for your best interest and your best interests only. We have zero relationships with any other third-party provider. We work for you and only you. I talked about the fact that we've been in the business a long time. We've got great relationships with the vendors out there. And again, lots of folks that you can talk to. Our reputation is very important to us. So certainly we would be happy to provide references to you as well. And then that last slide, please, Christina. At the end of the day, what's most important is, what this all means for you. And, if we're doing our job right, and we feel like we typically do, hopefully it results in higher profitability for you, and a positive impact to that bottom line. If for some reason we get into a project and there aren't any savings, we're not going to waste your time. We're going to let you know that, hey, you guys are right where you need to be on this particular area. And what that does give you is the peace of mind of knowing that you're right where you need to be. So I think there's benefit there as well. That second item there, the better program structure, we often say it's not always about just wringing juice out of the orange, right? I mean, pricing's great. We want to get you the best pricing we can, but there's other things that are important as well. Making sure that your business and contract terms are all favorable and so forth. So that would be another component. We talked about the time savings. There really is very little involved with your from your staff. You can be involved if you'd like. If you want to sit next to us in negotiations, you can. Or if you want us to feed you the information, we can also do that as well. But 9 times out of 10, we're managing the entire project. There's very little involved on your end other than meeting with us periodically for us to let you know what the savings look like and how we're going to proceed to the next step. And then lastly, we talked about the peace of mind. So whether we find savings or not, and we do 90 to 95% of the time, you will have the peace of mind that you're receiving the best pricing in the market that you should be getting for your size and scope. And again, I think that's important. So again, just in closing, I think we make it really, really easy to work with us. We'd love the opportunity to work with anybody out there on the call. Typically speaking, if you're within 24 months on some of these agreements, that's the time to start thinking about it, particularly if you might want to consider a change. And even if you're not considering a change, you don't want your vendors knowing that you don't have the ability and wherewithal to consider a change. So typically speaking, 24 months out is what we look for. Now, having said that, if you came to us and told us, hey, we're only 8 months out on an agreement or whatever, I mean, we can manage that as well. So right up until the time you sign that agreement, we can certainly insert ourselves into the process and help you out. So again, thank you so much. We love our Tennessee credit unions and all the folks in all the surrounding states. So we handle all of them. Patty and I do collectively, and we're looking forward to working with you folks. So thank you very much.
And that concludes our webinar for the day. Thank you for joining us and taking time out of your busy day. We appreciate it. We hope you're as excited about Symphony as we are and the benefits it can offer to the credit unions. On the screen now is our contact information. Later today, you will also receive an email with the same information. Please reach out to us if you have any questions or comments, or even if Dado and I have not had the chance of meeting you, please call us. We would love to chat about you, learn about your credit union. Again, thank you for taking the time today. Have a good day.